All right. Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise, honor, and glory to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, MakaKwadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone that taught us this truth. And salutations to the hopeful elect that's around the four corners of the globe. And the elect begins with 144,000. YAHAWAH, who the world ignorantly calls God and Jehovah. BAHASHAM is in the name. YAHAWASHI, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. The MakaKwadash, which is the Holy Spirit. I'm the brother YAHAWAH with the GMS Chicago camp out here in Chicago. Come back at you with another lesson. And Lord willing, I hope this lesson be edifying to the hopeful right select, the ones of the household of faith. Once again, I hope this lesson be edifying. Back at it, again with another lesson. I'm going to just entitle this lesson, I haven't done it in a long time, a while, Esau's murderous history, going into the forced hellenization of the Israelites. It's mainly the southern kingdom that was over there during that time, during the time of the Greeks, who was the main forerunner of that, basically the forced Hellenization, Antiochus epiphanes. So we're just going to jump into it, man, because you had a lot of our people, basically bowed down to the ways, basically of the forced Hellenization. But you had a lot of our people also, that was basically fighting to keep the laws, and a lot of our people was put to death because they didn't want to accept, the forced Hellenization during this time that Antiochus Epiphanes had put on the ones that were trying to fight, for the righteousness, of YAHAWASHI, trying to keep the laws to the best of their abilities. So we're just going to jump into it. We're just going to pull these precepts out. So this is from bringing God's word out the nations. I was just doing a little research myself, but just to go into a little background on this, devil Antiochus Epiphanes. But it says Antiochus Epiphanes ruled in Antioch in Syria over the Seleucid kingdom after the death of Alexander the Great. Right, I'm gonna get that in First Maccabees. How ultimately, when Alexander's generals put crown upon themselves, who ultimately end up sprouting from those generals, you had Antiochus Epiphanes. But we're gonna dive further into it. But I just want to get a little background on this devil. It says the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC. There was a civil war until his empire was divided between four of his generals. Right, you had Ptolemy, you had Antiochus, you had Cassander, you had Lysimachus, his four generals. It says I established a dynasty between four of his generals. It says Seleucus the first established a dynasty known as the Seleucids, which lasted about 250 years, ruling over a large empire stretching from Asia Minor through Syria and including much of Alexander's eastern territories to establish their power over such a large territory containing so many different nations and peoples. The Seleucids engaged in a policy of active Hellenization. It says the promotion of Greek culture, religion, and philosophy. During this time, the dynasty of the Ptolemies controlled Egypt. Israel lay on the frontier between these rival powers and was frequently fought over, first being under Egyptian control and later under Syrian control. Right, that's where you get the 6 Syrian wars from, which Daniel 11 touch upon that, the 6 Syrian wars. But that's a heavy breakdown in itself, but that's another lesson for another time. But really going into the forced Hellenization of our people, we're going to jump into this First Maccabees real quick, and we're just going to get into it. Talking about the forced Hellenization of our people, I got several scriptures pulled up. Ultimately, you had men, women, and children. Ultimately, the ones of our people that, that fought to keep the law, statutes, and commandments of YAHAWASHI, they were targeted and they were ultimately put to death, during the time of the Maccabees and during the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes. But let's get into it. This is the book of First Maccabees 1. And I'm going to start at 7. It says, so Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, right? Because Alexander the Great was the start of the Greek Empire, going into the leopard. I believe that's Daniel's the 7th chapter, if I'm not mistaken. But it says verse 7 says, so Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, right? The beginning, because if you go to verse 1, it says what? First Maccabees 1:1, I might as well just read it. And it happened after that, Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and the Medes, that he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece, right? So Alexander the Great was the first, ruler of the Grecian Empire, which marks the, the beginning rulership of the Edomites. But, just to go back to the lesson at hand, talking about, this devil Antiochus Epiphanes. Verse 7 says, so Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule every one in his place, right? Talking about his 4 generals. It says, and after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, so that their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth, right? Because Job 9:24 says what? The earth is given into the hands of the wicked, because every time when Esau, look at the different rulerships of Esau Edom, you had the Greeks, you had the Romans, ancient Rome, you got America today, and what? Evils, back then evils were multiplied, how much more now? So ultimately when these generals, ultimately put crown upon themselves and start ruling, evils were multiplied in the earth, and this was the time where a lot of our people went through hell, man, It says, verse 10, it says, there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. It says, in those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. Because like I said before, you had the sons of our people, that fought, to ultimately keep the law, statutes, and commandments to the best of their abilities, not accepting forced hellenization. And you ultimately had a lot of our people also that basically bowed down and accepting the ways of the Greeks, because what? If you read 1st and 2nd Maccabees, it takes place during the time of the Greeks, you had the Maccabees, this is the time period, if you read 1st and 2nd Maccabees, the time period that our people, were basically, Antiochus Epiphanes, was ruling, over our people, oppressing our people. It says verse 11, I'm gonna read this again. It says, in those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we had much sorrow. Because what? Jacob was going through hell, being oppressed, ultimately that forced Hellenization. A lot of our people accepted it, but at the same time, the some of our people, that wanted to keep the law, statutes, and commandments, that wanted to uphold that righteousness of YAHAWASHI, a lot of them were put to death for basically upholding righteousness and not, not accepting that forced Hellenization. But we're going to read more into it. It says, verse 12, it says, so this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so for herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinance of the heathen. It says, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, right? Because that's what a lot of those Greeks, did, performing, in the gym naked. A lot of our people took on the customs of the Greeks. Bear with me for a second. It says, verse 15, it says, and made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief, right? And just like our people today, man, a lot of our people wanted to be, basically the people of our people that basically follow the ways of the heathens to this day, wanted to be like Esau Edom, follow the ways of Esau Edom, then coming back to the law, statutes, and commandments of YAHAWASHI. The same thing is happening today, man. You got a lot of our peoples that sell out, that know that they're Israelites, but at the same time, partaking in American culture and things of that nature, It says, verse 16, it says, now when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have the dominion of 2 realms. Right, so it is going into, ultimately Antiochus Epiphanes, going into Egypt, ultimately trying to take Egypt and things of that nature. But let's jump down. This is the book of 1st Maccabees 1. Because during the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes, man, he was putting hell upon our people. I'm going to get that Daniel 8 too. So this is the book of 1st Maccabees 1. And let's see. Yeah, because the 1st and 2nd Maccabees are heavy chapters. Yep. 1st Maccabees 1 and 41, it says, moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all shall be one people. Right, meaning what? All shall follow the ways of the Greeks. It says, verse 42, it says, and every one should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. It says, yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols. It says, and profaned the Sabbath, right? Because a lot of our people, the ones of our people ultimately, basically accepted that forced Hellenization. Hey, they said to hell with it, and ultimately, to their own destruction, followed the ways of the Greeks. But I'm going to get into the fact that you have a lot of our people also, that kept the law, statutes, and commandments to the best of their ability, and basically, upholding righteousness, and were ultimately persecuted for it. But it says, verse 44, it says, for the king has sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that they should follow the strange laws of the land. It says, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and holy people. It says, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts. Right. So this is what our people was doing. They was following the ways of the Greeks. A lot of our people being Hellenized. A lot of our people accepted the Hellenization. Basically what? Sacrificing swine's flesh upon the altar. By the decree of Antiochus Epiphanes. Let's continue reading. It says, verse 47 again, it says, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts, that they shall also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, to the end they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. Let's actually get this Daniel 8 real quick, because Antiochus Epiphanes is actually spoken about heavy in prophecy. So this is the book of Daniel 8, and let's see, verse I'm gonna just get to the point. Verse 20, verse 21. It says, the rough goat is the king of Greece, right? I've read that first Maccabees, ultimately Alexander being the first over Greece. It says, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. It says, now that being broken, whereas four stood up, for kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. Right. Ultimately, reading that first Maccabees, going into the fact that ultimately, Alexander's, 4 generals put crowns upon themselves. It says, verse 23, it says, in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. It says, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Right, talking about Antiochus Epiphanes. How he ultimately, he got into power forced. Ultimately, how I said in the first Maccabees, how he basically consented for all to be one people. How it was ultimately, profane, and ultimately, unlawful for us to keep our laws, statutes, and commandments, man. He ultimately made the decree that that all shall become one people. All shall become, basically ultimately follow the ways of the Greeks. It was basically prohibited for us to, to keep our laws, statutes, and commandments. Verse 24 again, it says, his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And I'm gonna get into several different accounts, man, of what this devil was doing. Antiochus Epiphanes, a lot of our babies were put to death, men, women, and children alike, for ultimately keeping the ways of YAHAWASHI, It says, verse 25, it says, that through his policy, also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, which is the mind, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. And right, this is what this devil was doing, man. He prohibited us for basically serving YAHAWASHI, keeping the ways of YAHAWASHI. That includes what? The Sabbaths, keeping the Sabbath day, basically, putting righteous sacrifices upon the altar. I read in that first Maccabees. Let's go back to that first Maccabees. First Maccabees 1 and 45. It says, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbath and festival days and pollute the sanctuary and holy people. Right, and this happened ultimately during the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes. That forced Hellenization, where our people, it was basically prohibited from our people to keep the laws, statutes, and commandments. It says, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts, that they shall also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable and all manner of uncleanness and profanation. So the end they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. And whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he shall die. And a lot of our people was put to death. The ones of our people that ultimately, fought to keep the law, statutes, and commandments. It says, verse 51, it's in the selfsame manner wrote he to his whole kingdom and appointed overseers over all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city. Then many of the people were gathered unto them, to wit, everyone that forsook the law, and so they committed evils in the land. It says, and drove the Israelites into secret places, even wheresoever they could flee for secure. Right, because like I said, you had ultimately the ones of the wicked of our people that basically bowed down to the forced Hellenization that Antiochus Epiphanes, basically put out. Our people ultimately, a lot of our people accepted it, but you had the ones that ultimately fought to keep the law, statutes, and commandments. They were put to death, and it's actually going to go into that. It says, verse 54, so now on the 15th day of the month Caslu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side, and burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law which they found, they burnt them with fire. And whosoever was found with any the book of the testament, or if any committed to the law, the king's commandment was that they shall be that they should put him to death. It says, thus did they by their authority unto the Israelites every month, to as many as were found in the cities. Now the 25th day of the month they did sacrifice upon the idol altar, which was upon the altar of YAHAWAH. It says, at which time, according to the commandment, that they put to death certain women that had caused their children to be circumcised. Right. So during this time, you had, like I said before, you had a lot of our people, that fought to keep the law. But ultimately, they were put to death, and it's going to go more into it. It says, verse 61, it says, they hanged the infants about their necks, and rifled their houses, and slew them that had circumcised them. Right. The ones of our people that, that fought to keep the law, statutes, and commandments, the ones that were still following the law, to the best of their ability, despite the persecution. You still had our women circumcise their children. You still had a lot of our people keep the Sabbath day. It says, verse 62, it says, howbeit many in Israel were fully resolved and confirmed in themselves not to eat anything unclean, any unclean thing, Salakia. It says, wherefore the rather to die, that they might not be defiled with meats, and that they might not profane the holy covenant. So then they died. And there was a great wrath upon Israel, because during this time, like I said, our people was persecuted, man. The ones, especially the ones of our people that, that fought to keep the law, statutes, and commandments of YAHAWASHI, they were persecuted, man. But let's actually go into the, going to more of this devil Antiochus Epiphanes. It's a particular point I want to read. Yep, attack on the Jews. It says, in his frustration, he expressed his anger by attacking Jerusalem. He needed a secure frontier in the south against the new threat of the Roman power in Egypt. He could no longer allow Jerusalem to follow a religion different from the rest of his kingdom. In 167 BC, he sent a force of 22,000 soldiers led by Apollonius to Jerusalem, pretending to come in peace. They attacked the city on the Sabbath in full knowledge that, that the Israelites will not fight on their holy day, and slaughter many of its inhabitants. Right, and it gives you the scriptures, which I have, posted up, which we're going to get, Lord willing. It says, and predicted, and they took many women and children captive as slaves, then plundered and burned the city and pulled down its walls. It says he then began a violent policy of Hellenization. He made a decree forbidding the Israelites from following the laws of their ancestors, thus canceling the concessions to the Israelites made by his father. It says observance of the Sabbath, sacrifices, yearly festivals, and circumcision of male infants was made illegal. It says, right, as I read in that first Maccabees, Antiochus Epiphanes, basically made the decree that all should be one people, man. That we ultimately forget our laws and follow the ways of the Greeks. It says yearly festival and circumcision of male infants was made illegal. He ordered that copies of the Torah shall be destroyed under penalty of death. Jews, or I'm gonna say Israelites were to depart from the laws of their fathers and to cease living by the laws of YAHAWAH. It says pagan altars were set up all over the land. It says Israelites were forced to eat the unclean meat of pigs, right, as I read in that first Maccabees, swine's flesh ultimately being sacrificed on the altar, ultimately the temple, becoming profane, It says pagan altars were set up all over the land. Israelites were forced to eat the unclean meat of pigs. The temple was to be polluted and renamed as temple to Olympian Zeus. The Samaritan temple on Mount Gerizim was also renamed as the temple of Zeus, the friend of strangers. Right, talking about ultimately, this devil Antiochus Epiphanes, made it, unlawful for us to serve, YAHAWASHI, to keep the law, statutes, and commandments, But let's actually go. Let's actually get this first. Let's see. Because like I said, a lot of people was going through hell, man. That forced Hellenization. Ultimately, you had a lot of our people that basically bowed down to forced Hellenization, ultimately eating swine's flesh and things of that nature. But you also had our people, the ones that fought, to the very end to keep the ways of YAHAWASHI, Let's read another account. This is second Maccabees. I believe the second Maccabees. Let me see real quick. Let's see. Yeah, there's a lot of meat in here. But let me go back real quick. This is the book of First Maccabees 2. And I'm gonna start at 18. Because like I said, this was also during the time of the Maccabees. Ultimately, the Maccabees basically, putting up the fight against Antiochus Epiphanes to ultimately keep the ways of YAHAWASHI, basically upholding that standard of righteousness. But this is the book of, let's see, First Maccabees 2. Let me see where I'm going to start at, actually. I'm going to start at 18. It says, now therefore come thou first and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done, yea. It says, and the men of Judah also, and such as remain at Jerusalem, so shalt thou and thy house be in the number of the king's friends, and thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards. Let's continue. Verse 19 says, then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him, right? Because you had a lot of our people, basically, accepting, the ways of the heathens, in this time, the Greeks. It says, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers and give consent to his commandments, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers, which is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, following the ways of YAHAWASHI. It says, verse 21, it says, Yahweh forbid that we should forsake the law and the ordinances. We will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion, either on the right hand or the left. It says, now when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Israelites in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar which was at Modin, according to the king's commandment. It says, which thing when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled, neither could he forbear to shew his anger according to judgment, wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. Right, because like I said, you had a lot of people that willingly accepted the ways of the Greeks. You know, that Antiochus Epiphanes ultimately, you know, that decree he ultimately set out, you know. It says, verse 25, says, also the king's commissioner who compelled men to sacrifice, he killed at that time, and the altar he pulled down. Thus dealt he zealously for the law of YAHAWAH, like as Phinehas did unto Zambri, the son of Zalem. It says, and Mattathias cried throughout the city with a loud voice, saying, whosoever is zealous of the law and maintaineth the covenant, let him follow me. So he and his sons fled into the mountains and left all that ever they had in the city. So ultimately, you know, to ultimately escape persecution, you know, and ultimately flee to the mountains, what? To keep the ways of YAHAWASHI. You know, you had many ultimately that follow, you know, them of our people, the Israelites, to ultimately what? To keep the ways of YAHAWASHI also, you know, despite the persecution. It says, verse 29 says, then many that sought after justice and judgment went down into the wilderness to dwell there, both they and their children and their wives and their cattle, because afflictions increased sore upon them. Right. Afflictions ultimately and basically hell was upon our people, the ones of our people that ultimately, you know, fought to keep the ways of YAHAWASHI, the law, statutes, commandments. It says, now when it was told that king's servants and the host that was at Jerusalem in the city of David, that certain men who had broken the king's commandment were gone down into the secret places in the wilderness, they pursued after them a great number, and having overtaken them, they camped against them and made war against them on the Sabbath day. Right. Because what? You had a lot of our people, you know, the ones of our people actually, you know, that fought, like I keep saying, fought to keep the ways of YAHAWASHI. That's why ultimately they fled into the wilderness to ultimately to escape that persecution and to keep their laws, you know, the laws of YAHAWASHI, you know, to the best of their ability, you know, without, you know, despite the persecution. It says, and they said unto them, let that which ye have done hitherto suffice, come forth and do according to the commandment of the king, and ye shall live. But they said, we will not come forth, neither will we do the king's commandment to profane the Sabbath day. Right. So you have a lot of our people that were zealous to keep the ways of YAHAWASHI. Hey, despite death, man, you know. It says, so then they gave them the battle with all speed. Howbeit they answered them not, neither cast they a stone at them, nor stopped the places where they lay hid, but said, let us die all in our enmity. I can't even say the word. Enmity. Heaven and earth will testify for us that ye put us to death wrongfully. So they rose up against them in battle on the Sabbath, and they slew them with their wives and children and their cattle, to the number of 1,000 people. Right. So the ones that ultimately kept the ways of YAHAWASHI despite persecution, man. It says, verse 39, it says, now when Mattathias and his friends understood hereof, they mourned for them right sore. It says, and one of them said to another, if we all do as our brethren have done, and fight not for our lives and laws against the heathen, they will now quickly root us out of the earth. And right. And ultimately, you know, led by Antiochus Epiphanes, you know what? The Greeks knew that, man. The ones that ultimately knew that what? That our people was not going to fight back on the Sabbath day, man. You know? And what? They knew that. That's why they ultimately attacked them on the Sabbath day. It says, verse 41, it says that, and at that time, therefore they decreed, saying, whosoever shall come to make battle with us on the Sabbath day, we will fight against him, neither will we die all as our brethren that were murdered in the secret places. Right. So ultimately, you know, forefronted by Mattathias, they what? Ultimately, you know, was starting to fight back. You know, because what? Like I said, you know, basically, led by Antiochus Epiphanes, they knew that, our people that were zealous for the law will ultimately keep the Sabbath day, and they knew that our people was not going to fight back. So what? The Greeks took it as an opportunity to ultimately attack our people, the ones that were zealous for the law, man, especially on the Sabbath day, Let's get another one. And these are the different atrocities that our people went through, I'm not going to make this too much more of a long lesson, but I just want to get, a couple of these points out. This is what our people went through. This was the time of the Greeks. And when you ultimately get into the New Testament, when Apostle Paul went to go, to preach, unto the Gentiles, which who are the Israelite foreigners, you have to understand history. You have to read the first and second Maccabees, when jumping into the New Testament to get the understanding, the history of why our people was basically, following the ways of the heathen and things of that nature, being Hellenized, basically taking on the customs of the Greeks. And ultimately, this is the history right here, man. Our people basically being Hellenized. But there's a point I wanted to get out of here. Let me see. Because like I said, men, women, and children were ultimately put to death for keeping the ways of YAHAWASHI, So this is the book of 2 Maccabees, chapter 7, verse 1. It says, it came to pass also that 7 brethren with their mother were taken and compelled by the king against the law to take swine's flesh, and were tormented with scourges and whips. But one of them that spake first said, thus, what wouldest thou ask or learn of us? We are ready to die rather than to transgress the laws of our fathers. It says, then the king, being in a rage, commanded pans and cauldrons to be made hot. It says, which forthwith, being heated, he commanded to cut out the tongue of him that spake first, and to cut off the uttermost parts of his body, the rest of his brother and his mother looking on. Now, when he was thus maimed in all his members, he commanded him, being yet alive, to be brought to the fire and to be fried in the pan. And as the it says, and as the vapor of the pan was for a good space dispersed, they exhorted one another with the mother to die manfully, saying thus, the Lord Yahawah looketh upon us, and in truth have comforted in us, as Moses in his song, with which witness to their faces declare, saying, and he shall be comforted in his servants. Right. So ultimately, the mother comforting, ultimately them comforting each other, man, in the face of death, reading the top, it says what? They would rather die than transgress the laws of their fathers, man. So during this time, Hellenization, forced Hellenization on our people was real, man. That persecution. And in this time now, that persecution is going to come. Hey, Daniel 12 talks about, I'm not getting sidetracked for a little minute. It talks about, it's going to be a time like never before, man. But ultimately, like even back then and even now, man, the Lord is going to, protect this elect, man. It says, verse 6, it says, the Lord Yahawah looketh upon us, and in the truth have comforted in us, as Moses in his song, which witness to their faces declared, saying, and he shall be comforted in his servants. So when the first was dead, after this number, they brought the second to make him a mocking stock. And when they had pulled off the skin of his head with the hair, they asked him, wilt thou eat? It says, before thou be punished. It says, throughout every member of thy body. But he answered in his own language and said, no. Wherefore he also received the next torment in order as the former did. And when it says, and when he was at the last gasp, he said, thou like a fury takest us out of this present life, but the King of the world shall raise us up, who have died for his laws unto everlasting life. Because they ultimately knew, they ultimately knew the will of the Lord, man. Ultimately knowing that it was worth dying manfully, for the laws of YAHAWASHI to ultimately to transgress them, man. And it says, verse 9, it says, and when he was at the last gasp, he said, verse 10 actually, he says, after him was the third made a mocking stock, and when he was required, he put out his tongue, and that right soon, holding forth his hands manfully, and said courageously, these I have from heaven, and for his laws I despise them, and from him I hope to receive them again. It says, insomuch that the king and they that were with him marvel at the young man's courage, for that he, it says, for that he nothing regarded the pains. It says, now when this man was dead, also they tormented and mangled the fourth in like manner. Right, so ultimately, they was getting them to ultimately, to forsake the law, statutes, and commandments of YAHAWASHI. But they took their death manfully, They to transgress the laws of YAHAWASHI. It says, verse 14 says, so when he was ready to die, he said, thus, it is good being put to death by man, to look for hope from Yahweh, to be raised up again by him. As for thee, thou shalt have no resurrection to life. It says, afterward, they brought the fifth also and mangled him. Then looked he unto the king and said, thou hast power over men, thou art corruptible, thou doest what thou wilt, yet think not that our nation is forsaken of Yahweh. It says, but abide a while, and behold his great power, how he will torment thee and thy seed. It says, after him also they brought the sixth, who being ready to die said, be not deceived without cause, for we suffered these things for ourselves, having sinned against our power. Therefore therefore marvelous things are done unto us. It says, but think not thou that takest in hand to strive against Yahweh, that thou shalt escape unpunished. Right, because they, like I said, they ultimately understood the will of the Lord. Understanding what that YAHAWASHI will ultimately, get basically give them vengeance, upon their enemies. It says, but the mother was marvelous above all and worthy of honorable memory. For when she saw her 7 sons slain within the space of 1 day, she bare with a good courage because of the hope that she had in the Lord. It says, yea, she exhorted every one of them in her own language, filled with courageous spirits, and stirring up her womanish thoughts with a manly stomach. She said unto them, I cannot tell how ye came into my womb, for I neither gave you breath nor life, neither was it I that formed the members of every one of you. But doubtless the creator of the world, who formed the generation of man and found out the beginning of all things, will also of his own mercy give you breath and life again, as ye now regard not your own selves for his law's sake. Right. So ultimately, this devil Antiochus Epiphanes putting hell upon our people, man. Especially the ones that that fought to keep the laws, of Yahweh, BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI. It says, let's see. Verse 24 says, now Antiochus, thinking himself despised and suspecting it to be a reproachful speech, whilst the youngest was yet alive, did not only exhort him by words, but also assure him with oaths that he would make him both a rich and a happy man if he would turn from the laws of his fathers, and that also he would take him for his friend and trust him with affairs. But when the young man would in no case hearken unto him, the king called his mother and exhorted her that she would counsel the young man to save his life. It says, and when he had exhorted her with many words, she promised him that she would counsel her son. It says, but she bound herself toward him, laughing the cruel tyrant to scorn, spake in her country language on this manner, O my son, have pity upon me that bare thee 9 months in my womb. It says, and gave thee such 3 years, and nourished thee, and brought thee up unto this age, and endured the troubles of education. Right, so ultimately, they didn't, give up their integrity, for this devil Antiochus Epiphanes, man. They stuck it through to the end, keeping the ways of YAHAWASHI, despite the persecution and despite being put to death, But there was another account I wanted to get into, but, just for the sake of time, I'm going to end it all right there. But ultimately, the forced hellenization, Lord would if the Lord put the spirit on me, I can make a part 2. But ultimately, the Lord, ultimately, the ones of our people that kept the ways of YAHAWASHI, our Lord, was ultimately persecuted and was put to death in many fashions, man. Reading about, the woman and her 7 sons, man, they was ultimately one was, burnt to death. Another one had his tongue, cut out, things of that nature, man, But just for the sake of time, I'm going to just end it all right there. Lord willing, I hope this lesson was edifying. I want to end up by giving all praise, honor, glory to Yahweh, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, Makakwadash, Brakathum. Lord willing, once again, I hope this lesson was edifying. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of great millstone that taught us this truth. And salutations to the hopeful elect that's around the four corners of the globe. Lord, and I hope this lesson was edifying. Till next time, call me out Shalom and a Baba Ball.